tell if that mic's working, Chris?
It is.
Okay, good. Thank you. By the way, just we're supposed to get a new mic tomorrow. It's been ordered. We think it's here. Probably come tomorrow. That'd be great. So, as you can no doubt remember, this class was going to be devoted for about a 4-day period of time on the study of really social media, things we might learn about that. And so I kind of nicknamed this thing the good, the bad, and the ugly of social media. We talked about how the statistic analyses were gathered, let's put it that way. We've also talked about the positive uses of social media. So let me just start by asking a question. Is social media restricted to just texting? No, what else? What else do people do that we call social media?
Share photos, share videos.
Sharing videos, sharing information together. You check a website, see how your sports team's doing. Is that social media? Yeah. You have an account, and so now you've got a password or something, you know. Basically, whatever you're doing online, you're in communication with other people. It's a form of social media in some way or another. So we will end this study today. That's my intent. Even if I don't get through with all the notes that are prepared, I left enough explanation on the handout that you received. You can finish reading whatever we don't cover today, but this will be the end of the class, which is my way of announcing to you what we will begin studying next Lord's Day, Lord willing. This came about as a result of our last Monday morning for the master meeting in conversation with the elders. And we've reached a point where we feel like we've got some newer faces and some that are growing up to be a little older and so forth, that it might be good to return to some different things that we've studied long before. This kind of a refresher for us and maybe some new information for those coming up. We currently are faced with how many ongoing wars that you know about? How many? At least 2, right? Russia and Ukraine. What's going on with Iran and Israel again, you know. As a result of those, when they happen, particularly if it's one in the Middle East somewhere, there will arise the hue and cry of the last days. The last days are here. And so we're going to take a study about the kingdom of God, its establishment upon the face of the earth, and answer some of these kinds of questions. I'm not going to use the $15 and $20 words that they use for the guys that are into the real scholastic approach about all this. But if you've heard people saying things like, it's the end times, if you've heard people say things like the rapture is coming, are you ready, are you prepared? You heard people say some things like that, and that the Antichrist will show his face finally. Then what is that all about? Well, in some ways, we're going to address how those topics have kind of flourished through the years. They're not true, but they just flourish nonetheless. All right, enough said about that. Looking for today, this is a lot of different information. Again, I've given you some sources of information in the handout that you got. It's a 3-page handout. The last page is on the back of the second page, so just to be aware of that. So there's a part 1 and a part 2 to this study. And part 1, some of this information was taken from the article, the study that was done, more than an article. It's a published research work. 16 purposes of use for social media, taken from the benefits and harms of social media use. So these 16 reasons that you see enumerated below, these are the reasons that as they communicated with their sample group, the study group, which I think was around 1,200 people, these are the results, okay? So if you're using social media, you're probably using it for one of these reasons, maybe other reasons besides this, okay? But this is the only ones that we're looking at here today. So you can see what they are, and you can identify what you do it for. Do you do it for networking? Do you do it for staying up with your favorite sports programs, or you're just passing time? Do you like to just kind of scroll around online? Is that it? Are you looking for advice? Are you searching, trying to do some kind of research? You're looking for information of some kind. Are you looking for help at school? All these and other reasons are given, okay? So understand that the people that were used for this study all belong to the same kind of college group. I think it was somewhere in the Northwest. I did know where it was, but I forgot the name of the school now, but it's not important. But the main thing is these were freshmen and on up in terms of maturation in college. So we're looking at some responses that come from older teens into maybe young 20, 21s, something of that nature. So this is going to be reflected. These are their kind of choices, and these results come from that kind of group. Would it be different if they were to just survey all people that were over the age of 75? Yeah, probably. Probably. But nonetheless, just so you know what we're doing. So I'm asking a question here this morning: for what purpose do you use social media? Any of you that use social media, why do you use it? What do you do with it?
Search for information.
You search for information. One of the younger people here today finally volunteered a little bit of an answer here. Thank you. What else? What else do you know that we use social media?
I use it to share what Project Unify is doing and how we operate so that there's transparency to the work that we do.
Okay. Sharing information. Are you doing posting? Does it go to the website?
Post videos, a little bit all of it.
Okay. So just like what Chris was talking about a few moments ago, sharing videos, things like that. Okay.
If you own a business, you have to use it for marketing, because
If you're on business, what?
if you own a business,
Yeah.
you have to use it for marketing.
You have to use it to market your business, yeah.
And all that stuff does not exist anymore.
And so that's a reality. And you're talking from a businessman back there, you know, so that's a reality. So it's not like, well, we just don't need to get involved in social media. Because that ship sailed about the second time that texting was made possible. I think it's just all over the world. Yes,
We're involved in social media right now this second.
that's right. Because why?
Streaming.
Well, we're streaming something.
But that's how people communicate now.
That's right.
And we have several people watching right now.
So all of this is social media. Now, social media can be swayed one way or the other, depends on you. I think in the final analysis, if I were going to say that what one grand conclusion can you draw from all of this, all this reading, all this study, all these journals, articles, things of that nature that are involved in this kind of research, I would boil it down to this. It's just like you and the people you come to know face to face. You pick who your friends are. And who you pick will have an effect upon you, just like you will have an effect upon them. You want to be careful who your friends are. Yes, sir, Bob?
There was a Navy SEAL about 10 or 12 years ago wrote a book. And he said that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And if you stop and think about that, that should make us very careful as to who that we surround ourselves with.
Yeah.
And I tell young people on here a daily basis in the courthouse, sometimes multiple times a day, if you hang out with stupid people, you'll end up doing stupid stuff. And if you hang out with good and smart people, you'll end up doing good and smart things.
Yeah.
Their success will rub off on them. And that goes for social media too.
And as a good friend of all of us, really, someone that was in Africa with us on one of our mission trips there, a good brother in Christ, definitely not someone who was what we would say is stupid. The best of us can have a day in which we've done something stupid. And he did one day, and he knocked his head against something, had a big old bruise up there. He said, well, it must be Friday, because that's my stupid day. Get it all out on Friday. All right, question number 2. Did somebody have a comment?
Before you get too far in talking about this, being able to influence somebody, we all know that Israel and Iran is at war, like you mentioned a while ago. And when the flooding took place in North Carolina around Asheville and up in that area, Cody's very familiar with that area, they lost connection with the world. And Elon Musk has what's known as Starlink.
Yeah.
So he activated that for those people in those areas to be able to communicate with the outside world.
Yeah.
Well, the government in Iran had decided, I guess it was yesterday, to shut off the internet for the general public in Iran. Well, Musk has stepped in and activated Starlink for the citizens of Iran to be able to communicate with the outside world. Now we see this as a possibility of having a huge influence on the outcome of that warfare between Israel and Iran. Suppose the citizens of Iran start picking up on the truth and see how wicked and evil their government is and decided enough is enough of you folks.
Could happen.
I think they're about there.
So, communication. We're still communicating, you know. He's just made it possible for them to continue to communicate. So, the thing about the friends that you make face to face, that you greet, that are someone that you were introduced to, you get to know, you have opportunities to be together, you make decisions about, you know, your involvement with this person, whether you trust them, whether they kind of agree with you, or any way that you're forming a friendship. That's a little bit harder to do behind the keyboard or behind the phone. But you still have those 3 areas of influence. Those 3 degrees of influence are you, your friends, and their friends. It's kind of what Bob was talking about a moment ago. And so a lot of that communication now comes through, you know, in a digital form. So yeah, there's reason to exercise caution. And as I've said in all of the studies that I've read, even pointing out the good things or benefits of social media, they all have cautionary statements about there are bad things that surface on social media as well. Need to be aware. That's what we're going to be doing today, is understanding a little bit better. Aware of what? You know, what else might happen? What kind of trouble can you wind up getting into when you didn't mean to at all? Number 2, I want to ask you, what kind of a user are you for social media? Now, I think of myself as sort of at the bottom of the list about how often I use it. Until I read about research, sports teams, sharing some things together, etc. And I find out I'm probably doing a little bit more social media than I would have calculated and say, I just do it like 30 minutes a day or something. No, I do it more than that. Not much more than that. But what kind of user you are says something about those groups. And so through the statistical studies that were done, there are 3 different groups that I want us to notice here. I think you have all this on your handout. If you're looking and you see the word average in blue, the word passive in green, and the word active in black, those are 3 different groups in this study. In other words, all those people that were being studied, their responses being studied, finally were assimilated into 3 distinct groups. And the active group was 32.4% of the people involved. The average group was 42.4%. The passive group was 25.3%. Okay, so that's just certain numbers tells you a little bit about it. What they're trying to do is rank how often these groups are involved in social media and what do they learn from their involvement in social media. So the active group, the range is kind of like one of those questionnaires you get sometimes, and you got 5 choices. You know, very good is at the end, very bad is at the beginning, and all the other categories are in between. So the choices were never, and sometimes, and very often. I never use social media. I sometimes use social media, and I very often use social media. So now that you have an understanding about that, you can just take a look, and you see that the active group was a sometimes user, and that they are, for all of these purposes, for searching, for these 16 purposes, they do all of them except numbers 6, 7, and 8. The same thing would be true for the average group. They are closer to very often. And they do all but the next numbers, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10. So all those other numbers are the reason that they're on social media. And then to close to never, it's not actually never, but it's closer to never, is the passive group. And they do all but, let's see, 1, 11, 14, 15, 16. I think, no, those are the reasons that they actually use. They don't care much for the rest of them, but they follow numbers 11, 14, 15, 16. Platforms. How many social media platforms are you checking on when you do check, when you do post, when you do submit a video, when you do tap into some webpage somewhere to learn something? About 4. The lowest number is 3 platforms. And so how active are you? Is this a once an hour day or more than once an hour? As you can see for the active group, it's more than once an hour. As you can see for the average group, it's at least twice a day and plus. And as you can see for the passive group, it's once per day and it's once per week. And so the active and passive usage of social media. So I'm asking, what kind of user are you? What kind of user am I? Well, I'm going to fall between sometimes and a little closer to never, but I wouldn't. Don't put me at never, because that would be true. And I don't know what kind you are. I just want you to have an idea of thinking about how you use social media. Number 3 is, how satisfied is your use of social media concerning meaningfulness in life? They actually are trying to research this to get an answer to that. How many people are being helped to understand life better in a more meaningful way? The active users, when compared against the average users, the active users had significantly higher levels of all of the beneficial outcomes for social media, except for satisfaction with life, and higher levels of all the harmful outcomes with social media, except for distress and loneliness. So if you are an active user, you might pay attention to those 2 things. Passive users compared to the average users. The passive users reported significantly lower levels of beneficial outcomes on 2 measures. Received social media benefits and social connectedness had lower levels of harmful outcomes on 3 measures. Well, what's the reason for that? Well, because they use it less. The more you use it, the more outcomes you'll have. The less you use it, the less outcomes you will have. And those outcomes will be determined by your choices that you make and however it is that you use social media. So, lower social media stress, problematic use, and social comfort on social media was true of the passive group. A couple of notes I thought were noteworthy from the study. There was no one particular profile that experienced only beneficial outcomes or only harmful outcomes. So everybody that's using it experiences some of both. And as expected, the active users reported significantly higher benefits, except for satisfaction with life, and more harmful psychosocial outcomes, except for distress and loneliness, than the average users did. These results explain the double-edged sword of social media. I think that's pretty upfront for the obvious. And then letter D there, the active profile resembled an at-risk group for experiencing harmful outcomes. However, through this particular study that was done, it's the first one to highlight that even with harmful outcomes, even for an at-risk group, there tend to be some benefits gained that are not harmful, and that's what keeps them using social media. So that's kind of part one. Part two is a look at the different things that you might be aware of. The 10 negative effects of social media that you should know about is the title of that article. I'll give you the publication details here. You can look it up for yourself if you like. But let's pause right here. Has anybody got a comment just in general about social media or something you want to contribute to the class? Bob?
One of the things that I have read, he said, you know, a lot of people start getting kind of depressed because one person they look at is going on vacation to Europe. And then somebody else they look, next one they look at, they just bought themselves a new car. And then you look at the next one and they just got a raise and a promotion at work and a big boost in pay. And they see all this stuff happening all over the place. And they go, you know, I ain't done that, you know, my life is terrible. None of this good stuff is happening to me. And it makes them start feeling bad about their own life, that their own life is seriously lacking in some way because they don't have all this exciting stuff going on. But now, I used to work with a guy, and he had been married 4 or 5 times and had lived with several women in between these marriages. And he was married to a woman now, and they showed on his Facebook page them partying on the beach with the beer bottle in their hand, and his beautiful wife in her bikini, and them riding a motorcycle together, and doing this and doing that, and all kinds of stuff. And if you looked at that, you would think, boy, this guy is just having the time of his life, and everything's wonderful. But if you didn't know this guy, this guy was absolutely miserable because all these kids he'd had with different women, and he was having trouble with his current wife's ex-husband, and on and on and on. His current wife gave her ex-husband a key to his house where they were living, and it was, I mean, he would a lot of times come into work just in a horrible mood. And I'm asking him, you know, what's wrong? And he finally one day blew me out and said, look, everybody can't be happy like you are, you know, all the time, and blah, 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 just leave me alone, you know.
Yeah.
Pardon me, brother, but you know, that a lot of these people that are putting all this positive and good stuff on social media, they're not telling the bad stuff that's happening to them, you know, and nearly everybody's life has good things and bad in it, but a lot of people are looking over all this social media. That's not the sense that they get.
Yeah. Well, let's just say from Bob's comments that he's characterizing how it is that people can portray one thing when the reality is quite different. And that I suppose it could go the other way too. The reality could be better for some people than what they portray. Maybe that's also true. But nonetheless, whatever the reality is for you, be aware of some things. So let's take a look at these 10 different effects that you need to know about, negative effects. Feelings of loneliness and isolation is a common negative effect of social media. Social media's primary purpose was to allow us to connect with other people and expand our networks on a global scale. This is usually the reason many of us join a platform, and yet research suggests that increased problematic social media use is associated with an increased feeling of social isolation. People who use social media sites frequently are more likely to feel socially isolated rather than connected. Now, I don't know how they justify that premise there, how they quantify it. I didn't get that deep in the study that they had done, but it's a reality. In the final analysis, there are a number of people that feel that they're connected to social media, but their loneliness and isolation is a common feeling they get from it. Number two, cyberbullying on social media. One of the most common negative effects, research shows that 59% of American teens have been bullied or harassed online, and it can happen to adults too. All states have laws now requiring schools to respond to bullying. That's a pretty big percentage there, isn't it? 59%. I guess we could ask, get a group of 100 teenagers together and ask how many of them have actually been harassed or bullied or whatever you want to call it online through social media. According to a website called stopbullying.gov, so it's a governmental approach, the most common places where cyberbullying occur are social media such as Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok, text messaging and messaging apps on mobile or tablet devices, instant messaging, direct messaging, and online chatting over the internet, online forums, chat rooms, message boards, email, online gaming communities. I don't know. They say it's so. I'm not on gaming communities and some of these other things, so I wouldn't know. I can tell you this, I'm not being harassed that kind of way. I get an inordinate number of text messages from people I don't know. That's kind of harassing, but you know, I delete a lot of them. Don't read them. Social media, number 3, can lead to addiction. And addiction is a very serious negative effect. Many sufferers devote massive amounts of their lives to online platforms, often to the point that other areas of their life become unmanageable. Go ahead, Bob.
One thing that I have seen, and this happens often, Beverly will say, get over, she'll be online and looking on Facebook. She says, there's a white pickup truck just trying to break into somebody's garage out here, and people are putting it all over Facebook. Oh, look for this white pickup truck or whatever. They are so addicted to that they will, instead of calling 911 and having a fine young deputy come out and look into it, see if they can find the truck, they put it on Facebook to let the neighborhood go, which that is a good thing, but they should not do that in lieu of calling the people that they really should know about it and that can go and do something about it. That's how addicted some people are to it. The average person is not tied up with social media to that degree. If something like that happens, their first thought is to call 911, but these people's first thought is to get on Facebook about it.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can understand why. You get an alert message that a child's been abducted, you know, and they've got a make and model of the car, maybe even a tag number, you know. I understand that. And that you want to try to be aware of that in case you have to see that person. Addiction, long ago, before social media, there used to be a little bit of a problem with people and police scanners. That some people would just get addicted to whatever's happening over the police scanner. That's their life. And you know, eventually they wind up finding themselves in some kind of issue or problem. And that comes to the notice of detention of the police. And so they have to kind of deal with that every once in a while. I would suppose it's somewhat the same way here. What about gaming sites? You know anybody in the age group of 21 through 25, 26
I have talked
That's
to
a
numerous young women who got a divorce because their husband was addicted to gaming.
to gaming. So do you know what his practice was as far as gaming?
I know, they get up in the morning before they ate breakfast and started, and they would do that to the point of neglecting work.
Okay.
So
So you neglect work, that has a bad effect, right?
yeah.
Neglect family, that has a bad effect. Does that mean it's wrong, you can never have any kind of interaction with a game online?
You gotta have self-control.
Gotta have self-control. But self-control is always what it's about, isn't it? That's the difference between addiction and non-addiction. Self-control. Being able to rationally understand, I've got to go to work. If I miss too many days, I won't have a job anymore, you know. Self-control. But these are things that people are actually tapping into that they fall sometimes prey to this addictive behavior. Any addictive behavior is going to cause the same kind of problems in a family. Doesn't matter whether it's alcohol or it's gaming or something else.
Bill,
Yes, sir.
let me just throw in real quickly that several of these items you have on this sheet are very much interrelated. Brown University and I think it's Washington University last year completed a massive study of teenagers, social media, and they found that the highest levels of depression and anxiety occurred where teenagers were spending a large amount of time in videos, and that includes gaming. Anything that deals with motion on the screen, gaming, videos like YouTube, video chatting, any type of motion. What I'm going to say, it seems like the text doesn't affect children's brains, teenagers' brains, like video and motion does. There's a huge study coming out right now, how the human brain interprets inputs. And it seems that the human brain takes everything that is an input and converts it to an image. The human brain, especially the teenage brain, that is not fully developed yet, not an adult. Their chemical processes are not the same as an adult. They're much more likely to be, I guess you would say, hooked on social media that has moving images. But that in itself creates two problems. It seems to create a higher level of depression and anxiety, and even the gaming seems to have, among those that are hooked, it creates a higher level of lower self-image, where they see themselves in a negative light. It increases the likelihood of teenage suicide, and all of these things are really interconnected, where they can become addicted to just the motion that they see in video, social media.
Like I gotta watch it.
Yes, yes, and it seems to be a difference between moving images and text, or just a static image that doesn't move. But moving images seems to have a direct connection to depression and anxiety, especially in teenagers.
Well, if it's a moving image, you're gonna spend more time to see what the image is doing. And this is going to be, and most videos have some form of, you can hear the voices as well. And you're getting 100% saturation input, visual, audio, etc. And, a couple of the articles involved in these studies talk about how that this triggers cortisol and dopamine in your
Yes.
brain. Those are pleasure responses. In other words, you are being chemically told this is a neat thing to do. You are rewarded right away with something, some sense of something. And that's what leads to the addiction. There again, self-control is an issue. So what do you do?
It's like a drug user though, Bill. It gets to the point that you can't control yourself
Yeah.
because you are addicted to those chemicals.
Yeah,
And then it's like a drug user, you have to watch more and more to get that same pleasure. And so it reaches a saturation point where you can't watch enough to get the same amount of pleasure you used to.
yeah. Well, I know some parents are, for instance, they're trying to restrict usage for the children, young children, about the phone, smartphone, iPhone, whatever, having their own account, et cetera, et cetera. And some parents aren't. But if you want to help to bring a child up in a well-rounded emotional state, you need to do something about that phone before it does something bad. Let's go on real quick. Besides addiction, FOMO, this is an emerging negative effect of social media. FOMO is fear of missing out. In other words, social media is an emerging disorder you may not have heard of, fear of missing out. It develops when someone is afraid that their friends are, or might be, or will be, doing something and have not included them in it. And so they need to constantly check with those friends to see what they're missing out on. And people with high levels of this FOMO report more problematical social use of media. Age and gender don't seem to influence this particular problem. The people with a high depressed, anxious, and neurotic scale link to an increased fear of negative evaluation because of their fear of missing out. So just ask yourself, you're riding down the road and your phone beeps. I've heard that. What do? Instantly, you got to know. You got to know that. You got to see that text. You got to respond. You got to know. Where's the self-control? So self-control is a big issue with regard to this, and you can read the rest of these yourself. We are out of time. Well, thank you very much for your attention and your contribution to class today.